So Lead2Inclusion is a DE&I consultancy that really works with organizations to bolster and support and build their DE&I strategies. Everything from building a business case to learning and development to creating strategies to effectively develop and retain and attract diverse talent. And I've been doing this diversity work for over 30 years. Prior to leading my own consultancy, I worked at a number of different organizations, most recently at Diversity Best Practices, where I led their organization and built a business from about 120, mostly blue chip companies, Fortune 500 companies, to over 350 clients. And they came to us for our DE&I expertise to help them build their strategy and execute it. Yeah, there are a lot of opinions on DE&I training in the workforce, and I'm going to answer that question by providing a little bit of, I think, a bigger context first. So I think organizations struggle overall with diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts and approaches in general. There is some skepticism around that. And I do think that what we see, and I've been in diversity, equity, and inclusion now for over 30 years, and what we see as diversity practitioners is we see kind of this cyclical cycle happening. And what we typically see is we see a catalytic event. So whether it's a civil rights, whether it's Black Lives Matter, #MeToo, anti-Asian violence, LGBTQ+, or anti-Semitism violence, those catalytic events typically trigger corporations' attention. And so we see CEOs, we see C-suites and organizations pay attention and really want to do and make a difference, which is fabulous. And what they'll do is they'll invest time, they'll invest effort, they'll invest resources into diversity, equity, and inclusion. They will support their chief diversity officers to be able to do what they need to do, and they'll invest in learning and development training. In fact, one of the recent statistics said that $8 billion was spent in L&D diversity training over the past couple of years. But what happens is that a couple of years after these investments are made, CEOs and organizations look at the results and they're looking for representation results. They're looking for other major results or impact from some of this work, and they don't always see it. And they also may hit some financial struggles. And so what happens is investments are pulled back, resources are pulled back, chief diversity officers are put under different types of pressure. And people begin to question the authenticity and really the effectiveness of diversity and inclusion in general in the workforce, especially some of the learning and development training. From my perspective, that this happens for two reasons. One reason is that we don't have authentic and engaged buy-in from our leaders. The recent research that we have seen is that while 95% of CEOs and C-suite executives are fully committed to their diversity efforts or say that they are, 79% feel that they are overrated and overblown, and 30% feel forced to focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we don't truly have that authentic buy-in. The second piece of it is that most organizations fail to approach diversity, equity, and inclusion as a large-scale cultural change. So they'll implement and put resources towards learning and development. They'll implement and put resources towards different diversity efforts, but they don't look at it systemically and holistically in their organizations. What organizations need to do is they do need to invest in learning and development. It is absolutely fundamental and core to building the foundation of awareness and understanding and the building the foundation of skills that are needed in the workplace. But they then have to tie it systemically into their systems, their people, their processes in order to make sure that all of those behaviors are actually tracked, held accountable, and are making progress against some of those things. And so DE&I learning and development, fundamental part of it, but just a piece of the puzzle. Organizations need to look at it much more holistically. So to start your DE&I effort, I always say you've got to start with data. Businesses are run off of data, right? So really taking a look at the overall picture of your data. What does your representation look like? How engaged are your employees? What is the productivity levels? Where are your growth markets? And what do those growth markets look like? What does the talent pool that you're trying to attract? What's the data behind what they look like? and where they're coming from and what their skill sets are. Understanding the data of where your pain points are will help you to develop the right strategy. If your pain point, for example, is that you don't have enough diversity in your pipeline, or that you don't have enough diversity in your current talent pool at a VP level, you can target your efforts towards those specific pain points within your organization, or those particular bottlenecks within your organization, just like you would any kind of manufacturing process or any kind of business. Take a look at where your bottlenecks are, where your issues are, and then address those challenges specifically. Once you're able to identify where those challenges and bottlenecks or pain points are, you then can build the right learning and development strategy that can tackle and build the capability of your managers to address some of those issues, or build the right programs that are going to help you build those gaps in your talent pipeline, or gaps in your recruitment process, for example. So starting with the data, identifying where the challenge points are and the things that you need to change, and then developing the right learning and development and strategies and programs to address those things. Lastly would be, of course, to continue to measure those, the impact of all of those things. Continue to measure where are your success and success factors, and how are they helping. To celebrate some of those successes along the way. Really important to be able to do that, especially as you kind of want to break through some of that authentic buy-in. Let people know that you are making progress, and also let people know where there's still work to be done as well. So starting with data, and then ending with kind of data and transparency around that data. In terms of 2023 and beyond, there's a number of different things, and I'll maybe answer it in a couple different ways. First is, and I mentioned this already, but making sure that you're tying all of your DE&I efforts into your holistic systems. Really ensuring that you've got authentic engagement and buy-in from the top of the house, and cascading it all the way down, and making sure that accountability and metrics are in place. So knowing those behaviors that you want to change, knowing the culture that you're trying to change, how are you then tying into performance management? How are you tying into your compensation plans? How are you ensuring that the people that you are hiring and promoting and advancing in your organization demonstrate all of those behaviors? We talk about the fact that we want leaders who are managing inclusively, but yet we don't always hire, advance, promote people with those skill sets in mind. So really tying into the overall process is, I think, a number one thing to do. Secondly, I think it's around, for most organizations who have looked to or have made progress in some of those changes, it's making sure that you're also sustaining those learnings and sustaining those behavior changes. And so it's a small tactic, if you will, but just-in-time reminders, creating a set of tools or set of interactions and engagements that remind your managers and your leaders about the various biases that may be existing in the organization, or that maybe individuals have, and reminding them at critical touch points, what I call employee touch points. The employee touch points are at the hiring process, are at the performance review process, the talent management process, succession planning, compensation, et cetera. All of those employee touch points. Reminding managers of potential biases, reminding managers of the goals and objectives and the data that you're trying to achieve, the metrics that you're trying to achieve, instilling those on a regular basis so they become part of the organization, I think, are really important as well, and just part of the culture. The last thing in terms of thinking maybe future forward that I'm not sure if organizations are thinking about, but when we think about the skill sets that are needed and the impending talent gap, we know that the talent gap used to be about 23 million predicted. Now it's upwards of, way upwards of that. I think it was, somebody predicted even 85 million talent shortfall coming forward. And what I hear constantly from C-suite executives is that we aren't finding the right talent with the right skill sets, particularly diverse talent with the right skill sets that are needed in order to take us forward into the next century or a couple of decades, if you will. And so organizations can really start thinking about, how do I develop my intact and in-house diverse talent to get some of those skill sets? So it's not just about preparing them for promotion, but also preparing them to have the skill sets that are going to be needed to bring your organization forward. So skill sets like AI, data analytics, project management, some of the skill sets that we hear are lacking. in some of the workforce, focus on those hard technical skills with the current diverse talent that you have. It's an opportunity to build and retain and engage your employees in a different way than what they're typically used to. So kind of forward thinking.